Hey everybody, this is Kennedy Hawk from the MCM team. If you listen to our last audio cast, we're going to be covering card games other than just Marvel Champions now, and one of the games that I've been playing a lot recently is Lorcana. So this is our first piece of Lorcana video content, and today we're going to be giving some tips and tricks for different scenarios that you run into in Lorcana. So our tips and tricks video number 1 is all about syncing that nasty Amber Simba. And if you haven't run into this before, we'll show you what situation you're trying to prepare yourself for. And then we're going to go through ink by ink and talk about the different solutions to either bypass, eliminate, or just generally befuddle Simba himself. So, what is this Simba scenario we're talking about? In Lorcana, you're trying to get to 20 lore. Those are the little diamonds in the bottom right of a card. And one of the aggression or lore rushing strategies that we've seen that is really popular is to play this 1-cost Amber or Yellow Lilo, who's a 1/1 that can quest for 2 lore. And then on turn 2, to quest with Lilo, and then play this 2-cost Simba, who's a 2/3 with Bodyguard. Bodyguard says this character may enter play exerted. An opposing character who challenges one of your characters must choose one with Bodyguard if able. And that if able is going to be super important. So, because Simba can enter play exerted, he can protect Lilo, and there's a limited set of things you can do in turns 1 to 3 to prepare for this. So we're going to go through ink by ink and talk about the different cards that can help you. But there's 2 situations and phrases I'm going to use a lot. So we're going to go through those really quick. One phrase is on the play. On the play means I am the first player. I am the first player to play cards. I don't get to draw a card on my first turn, but I do kind of get the initiative. So on turn 1, you'll likely play a 1-drop. Every color has one of these 1-cost 2/2 1-drops. So we can just assume for the most part you're going to play one of those, but there's situations where you might want other 1-drops as well. On your opponent's turn 1, they're going to play Lilo. And then turn 2, what do you do to respond to this? How do you prepare for what is probably going to be a Simba on the next turn? The opponent's second turn, we're going to assume they play a Simba and Bodyguard and quest with Lilo, unless you've done something to prevent them from doing that on your turn 2. And what can we do on turn 3? I'm mainly focusing on those turn 2 and turn 3 plays, because if you're going to wait until turn 4, 5, or 6 to deal with Lilo, she can often get 4 to 6 lore, and that is really game-changing if that Lilo can quest more than 2 times. There are some colors in some situations where you might want to wait until turn 4 to deal with Lilo, and I'll try to bring those out as we go along. But on the play in general means you're the first player. You get the chance to set up before they play their Simba and anticipate it, or maybe even scare their Simba away. On the draw, opponent's turn 1. They're going to be the start player. They're going to play a Lilo. What do you do on turn 1 in response to this Lilo? Do you play a 1-drop? Do you hold your card back? Do you do some other shenanigans? We'll talk about a couple different scenarios. Opponent's turn 2. They play that Simba Bodyguard and quest with Lilo. What can we do on turn 2? We have less turns to respond to try to deal with Simba and Lilo now. But also, I'm still going to consider, even on the draw, what could you do turn 3 to, get great board advantage versus this really great lore rushing start. So we're going to go through color by color, and we're going to start with Amethyst. With each color, I'll show sort of the cards and talk through them, and then with Amethyst, I'll show 2 specific examples using these cards when you're either on the play or on the draw and how you could get around things. So Amethyst has Befuddle. It's a 1-cost action that returns a character or item with a cost of 2 or less to the player's hand. So you could, on the draw, play this turn 1 and bounce that Lilo back to hand. That's not what I recommend, because your opponent's gladly going to pay 1 more to play Lilo again. All that does is delay the onslaught a turn. But if you wait until turn 2, on turn 1 you play a 1-drop, on turn 2 you befuddle the Simba, now they have to play 2 more to play Simba, so they're spending more ink, and you can crash into that Lilo and remove her from the board. Really, really good card in this matchup, and just good general card for early game control. The other card I have in here for Amethyst is Rafiki. So this is one where on turn 3 you can play Rafiki. You can crash into Simba favorably because you'll take 2 damage back, but you'll remove that Simba with your Rafiki, and whatever you played on turn 1 and 2 can take care of that Lilo. Now, if you're on the play, that means you've wiped out your opponent's entire board, and you potentially have 3 characters on the board. That's a huge game swing. If you're on the draw, your opponent might also have a 3-drop on the board, but you could still have 3 things on the board to their 1, and you're setting yourself up pretty favorably. So for Amethyst, let's go through these 2 scenarios. On the play, I kind of talked through this one already. On the play, what you're going to want to do is on turn 1, play an Archimedes. They will play a Lilo. On turn 2, you're going to probably play a 2-drop, not like get too far ahead. And then Simba will come down on your opponent's turn 2. And then you'll befuddle that Simba and crash into Lilo. You could do the exact same thing on the draw, right? It's going to be set up even better that way because they're going to play their Lilo, you're going to play your 1-drop, they're going to play their Simba, you're going to befuddle it and remove it turn 2. That's also pretty amazing. But there's some other things you can do on the draw or on the play as well. So let's talk through that Rafiki situation. Turns 1 to 2 on the draw, you could play a 1-drop, maybe an Archimedes, and then you could play a Dr. Facilier, the 2-drop. And then on turn 3, you can play Rafiki, crash into Simba, crash into the 1-drop, and have that large board advantage or swing. It's really easy in these situations with Amethyst to end up where you have 2 to 3 characters on the board and the aggression deck has none, and they have less cards in hand because they've spent more cards getting things out. So I definitely recommend if you're struggling with Lilo, Simba, and the whole Rush lore archetype, include some Rafikis, include some Befuddles in your deck, and look for them early in the game. All right, next let's move on to Ruby. There's 2 trick cards that I think help in Ruby. And they're both really good cards in general, so you're not even just including these cards to counter this combo, but just all around in general. First, you've got LeFou, the Instigator. He's a 2-cost Dreamborn ally with 2 attack and 2 willpower and 1 lore. But you're not using him for his lore, you're using him for his ability Fan the Flames. When you play this character, ready chosen character. They can't quest for the rest of the turn. It doesn't say ready a character you control. So if your opponent plays Lilo and you play Sergeant Tibbs, the 1-cost 2/2 in Ruby, your opponent might play a Simba next turn. You can play LeFou, ready their Simba, and then crash your Tibbs into Lilo. You still have to deal with Simba someday because they're just going to drop more 2 lore characters that he protects, but you've gotten rid of that like early lore rush that can really put you behind the clock. Similarly, Gaston does almost the same thing for you. You play a Sergeant Tibbs, they play a Lilo. You play a Gaston, they play a Simba and quest. Next turn, Gaston can eliminate Simba in 1 swing, and you're free with your Sergeant Tibbs to hit Lilo unless they follow it up with a second bodyguard. So generally, anything at 2 costs that can attack for 3 or more is going to be really good at challenging that Simba play. Next, we're going to move on to Emerald, and I'm not going to lie, I have a lot of cards in here for Emerald, but Emerald has the hardest time dealing with this. So Megara is a Pulling the Strings Dreamborn ally, 2 cost, 2 attack, 1 willpower, with the ability Wonder Boy. When you play this character, chosen character gets +2 attack this turn. This is going to let you trade up into Simba. So if you play, your opponent plays a Lilo, you play a Duke of Weaselton, who is the 1-cost 2/2 in Emerald. Your opponent plays a Simba, you play a Megara to pump up that Duke and crash into Simba, just getting him off the board. Next turn, Megara can probably take care of Lilo unless it's followed up with another bodyguard. Still not great because Lilo's going to ping Megara back, but is an option, and you can boost characters from other colors, maybe 1/3 1-drops into swinging into Simba and surviving, and then you've got 2 characters to their 1, which can be really good. With Emerald, if you can wait until turn 3 or 4, there's some other solutions. So we've got Jasper, the Common Crook. When this character quests, chosen an opposing character can't quest during their next turn. So who cares about Lilo? We'll just make her not quest the rest of the game until you get rid of my Jasper. And Iago does a very similar thing. Let's say you're on the play. You play a 1-drop, you play a 2-drop. They play a Lilo, they play a Symbol, you play an Iago. You can exhaust your Iago, forcing Lilo to attack into you. Simba doesn't have enough damage to get rid of Iago. Depending on what their 3-drop is, they might have to crash Lilo into Iago, which will get rid of her. Some other Emerald cards and tricks that I thought were worth mentioning. Tinkerbell, most helpful, is a 2/3 4-cost 2 lore questing character with evasive. Only characters with evasive can challenge this character, so she's pretty safe and a pretty good card in general. Her ability, Pixie Dust. When you play this character, chosen character gains evasive this turn. You can give Simba evasive. And remember, Bodyguard says you have to choose them as your challenged character if able. But if Simba has evasive and you aren't attacking with an evasive character, like your Duke of Weaselton or your Megara, then you're going to get around Simba because you can't challenge him, so you can bypass the Bodyguard. Really good sneaky play for getting around Simba. And then this last one is The Beast is Mine. Not super recommended. I think that this event is super expensive for what it does. I really like Reckless as an ability, so the ability Reckless makes it so that character can't quest and must challenge if able. So you can give Lilo Reckless. If you have an exhausted character that doesn't get defeated by everything else on your opponent's board, Lilo will have to swing into it. It is not an option. She cannot just decide to sit back unless there's nothing she could attack. And even if she does, she can't quest. But at the cost of 3, that's a pretty big tempo hit for getting rid of a 1-cost card. So I'm not super impressed with this one, but it can work in a pinch, and if you're going to use it later in the game on bigger characters, then it could pay off. All right, next let's look at Sapphire. So there's 2 cards I have here, and just like Emerald, Sapphire is probably the ink that struggles the most with this. You can accelerate and get ahead, right, with 1 jump and Grammatala and things like that, but by that you're on turn 4 or 5, and yeah, you're at 7 ink, but your opponent is already at like 14 lore, and that becomes a problem. So luckily you do have some pretty good 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop characters, but the most important one here I think is Philatides from Hercules, the Trainer of Heroes. A Storyborn Mentor 2-cost character with 3 attack and 1 willpower, and the support ability. When this character quests, you may add their attack to a chosen character's attack this turn. So you can play Philatides on turn 2, you can give your 1-drop Flounder plus 3 attack so he can just smash into that Simba and open the way for you. Again, Philatides' 1 willpower is a little bit rough, right? Lilo can swing and will poke back into him if you end up using him to attack into her. Work Together is another one I put on here. This is another one sort of like, what was the last card? The Beast is Mine, where I'm not like a super big fan of this card. I think support's a really strong keyword, but I don't know if it's strong enough to warrant being on an event yet, versus just being on a character you could play. Chosen character gains support this turn. When they quest, they add their attack to another character's attack this turn. So this can be really good at eliminating late game Lilo Simba combos, but not super much early in the game. I mean, the best you could do is play Flounder, play another Flounder, or play a 2-drop, and then turn 3 use this to sort of spam into things. But you're still not able to get 2 attacks off and get into Lilo that turn for that. So you're usually waiting until turn like 3 or 4 to destroy Lilo. I think turn 4 is typical with Work Together. And I'm not the biggest fan of that one. But it's an option. If you're stuck with limited cards and you're playing Sapphire, might be a card to include. Finally, we get to Steel. Steel has by far the best options for dealing with Lilo. And I should mention, it's not just Lilo. In Amethyst, there's a Maleficent that has the exact same stat line as Lilo, but getting past Simba to hit those 2 characters can be really important. So here we've just got a plethora of awesome options. We've got Captain Hook, who's a 1-cost Dreamborn villain pirate captain, a lot of traits, 1 attack, 2 willpower with Challenger 2. So basically, you can play Captain Hook turn 1. If your opponent plays Simba turn 2, Captain Hook can swing in and kill him for 1 hit. There are no other 1-drops in the game, I believe, that can just swing into Simba and remove him. There's Befuddle that can bounce him, but Captain Hook is the one that can swing in. And better yet, if you can wait 1 more turn, or if you're, a little bit ahead of your opponent, maybe you're on the play, you could play Prince Eric. Prince Eric is the same exact thing as Captain Hook, a 2-cost Storyborn hero prince character with 1 attack and 3 willpower and Challenger 2. While challenging, this character gets +2 attack. So Eric on turn 3 can swing into Simba to remove him and survive, unlike Hook. And then Hook can swing into Lilo. So you're giving your opponent 1 to 2 quests with Lilo, but that's probably pretty acceptable for the big board advantage that you're going to get. There is also Fire the Cannons in Steel, which is a 1-cost uninkable action that deals 2 to a chosen character. So who cares about Simba? I will just fire the cannons at Lilo the Sad Girl. Totally an option. I'm a little bit hesitant on uninkables in my deck. I try to keep it to 12 or less, and I don't know if this one always makes the cut for me, but if it's aggro-heavy meta, it's probably worth it. Another option that I like a little bit better is Smash. Not as efficient on damage, 3 cost for 3 damage, but it is inkable in case you don't run into this aggro matchup. And what you do here is you play a 1-drop Hook, you play a 2-drop Eric, turn 3 you smash Simba, and then send Eric or Hook into Lilo. So again, you're waiting till turn 3 to delete or banish the Lilo, but you are getting a pretty good board advantage and really getting rid of that Simba problem child. And Steel has more. We've got two other characters I want to talk about. If you're willing to wait till turn 3 to 4 to get rid of Lilo, we have Captain Hook and Tinkerbell, who can both shift on turn 3 for Captain Hook or turn 4 for Tinkerbell into a 5+ cost character, which would let them sing Grab the Swords on turn 3 for Hook or 4 for Tinkerbell. So it can be a really good play to play your Captain Hook, play your Prince Eric, turn 3 shift Captain Hook, play Grab Your Swords. That gets rid of the Lilo and gets rid of the Simba, and then your Eric could crash into Simba to truly remove him. And now you've got two characters, one that's a 5-drop, and your opponent's got none. And that's if you're on the play. If you're on the draw, your opponent might have a third character that also gets hit by that Grab the Swords, and you can really swing wide with things. Tinkerbell, same way, has just about the same ability, but it's a turn later, so you play a 3-cost Tinkerbell. That's a little more telegraphed, because Tinkerbell's a lot more popular character in the meta right now than this 3-shift Captain Hook. But you play Tinkerbell in turn 3. Turn 4, you shift Tinkerbell where she AoEs your opponent's board for 1. She has the option to sing Swords, so then she's AoEing for 3 the turn she comes out, or she could crash into Simba and ping something else for 2. Depends on what the board looks like and what you want to do with that. So Steel, like a ton of good options for Steel. If you're really struggling with the aggro meta, I highly recommend Steel's Nink. And finally, Amber itself. Amber itself, surprisingly, also has some of the fewest options, other than run the same package and see what happens. The one that I have seen work pretty well is in one of those Rockstar Stitch decks. If you include a Hey Hey, who has support built in, but has 2 willpower, which is a big deal. As a 1/2, you could play Hey Hey turn 1. Turn 2, you could play your own Simba, where your opponent would have to crash Simba and Lilo in to get rid of him. Probably don't want to do that. Turn 3, you can quest with Hey Hey to pump Simba to a 3/3 crash into their Simba favorably and start rolling into all of their small 1-drop Lilos. So those are ways in every single ink that you can take down Simba. Simba is very strong. He's a good card. There's reasons to not run him if you're running an Amber deck, but he's also a very good just all-around card for keeping characters around. But at least every color has an option to remove or bypass him in the first few turns. It's really important, especially right now in Lorcana, to know your matchups, especially in best of 3 games. Once you're done with that first game, maybe you squeaked out a win, maybe your opponent did, you now know what to prepare for in Game 2 and Game 3. So know your matchup. If your local is super Amber aggro heavy, you got to make sure you're be prepared to take out Simba with these plethora of options. Channel your inner Scar, take down Simba, and try out some other fun decks in Lorcana. So just as a reminder, we are Marvel Champions and more, not Marvel Champions Monthly anymore, and we're going to be covering all sorts of card games, including Lorcana, and I'm super excited to spread my love of all sorts of card games around. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you crush some Simbas and take down some aggro players, myself included, and we'll see you at the tables next time.